You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and on tonight's show, I'm joined, as always, by the lovely Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, not too bad. How have you been this week?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Yeah, it's been a really good week so far.
Yeah, you've gone back to work, haven't you, now?
Yeah, that's not been quite so good. But yeah, and I can't get back into work mode. It's really bad.
I bet, and I bet you love the fact that kids have gone back to school as well now.
Oh, now that is bliss, because I can actually read without interruption or do some work without interruption. It is brilliant. Yes, I love it.
No, it's there because you've actually read my blog. Well done.
Oh dear, funny boy.
I know, I will be sending you the other 4, so don't worry about it. So, very soon.
Oh my word. Talking of writing and reading, I'm reading a great book at the moment, and I've been following these 2 gentlemen, but we've only got one on tonight, but I've been following them for quite a long time. And their work is absolutely phenomenal. Now, the book I'm reading is called The Green Stone, and it's the 40th anniversary. And tonight in the studio, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Mr. Graham Phillips, the author and one of the main conspirators of all of this. Good evening, Graham.
Good evening. I'm absolutely delighted to be on the show.
I'm absolutely a little bit starstruck. I'm just have to say it, a little bit starstruck.
Well, I'm not a conspirator. I'm actually an antagonist.
Now, your story is absolutely incredible, and looking at it from outsider's eyes and looking it in, it sounds so fantastical. But everything you detail in your books, yourself and Andrew Collins, has happened, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was 40 years ago, pretty much now. It all began on the 13th of October, 1979, when we started one of the most bizarre adventures of the paranormal that I can, that I've ever read about or seen on the movies anywhere.
I know, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, oh my word. Now, this all starts it starts strangely in its own right, to be fair, and it continues and gets weirder and weirder and weirder. But it affected you so personally, didn't it?
Well, yeah, because just to give your listeners a bit of a background, 40 years ago, I was the editor of a magazine called Strange Phenomena. And the Andrew Collins, who you mentioned, he was the chief investigator for the magazine. And we investigated, obviously, because of its name, various paranormal, supernatural mysteries. And it just started really strange because Andrew Collins, decided he was going to try out some new hypnosis technique he'd worked out, which basically involved half a bottle of vodka.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah, where can we sign up?
And we were at the headquarters of the magazine, which was an old Victorian house in Wolverhampton. And he basically put me under hypnosis. As far as I was concerned, I just passed out because of the vodka, and I was also tired. But when I came out of this state and he woke me up, he said, "Oh my God, Graham, you won't believe it. You were speaking in this whispering voice, talking about a green stone that had been lost to history and that we must find it. And you gave us all sorts of details." Now, I thought he was having me on until he played a tape of my own voice speaking. Then I thought, okay, under hypnosis, people can say all sorts of imaginative things. But the bottom line of this, what I whispered during this hypnotic state, was that this green stone was said to possess strange supernatural powers. It had once belonged to Mary, Queen of Scots. It had fallen into the hands of the gunpowder plotters in 1605. And when they were discovered trying to murder the king and the whole of Parliament, the stone was hidden. Mm-hmm. And clues to its whereabouts were left in this old Tudor house called Harvington Hall near the town of Kidderminster in central England. And that if we went there, we'd find these clues. Well, I just thought this was absolute rubbish until later that same night, we got a phone call from one of the people who was involved with the Strange Phenomena team, a guy called Alan Beard, who said, I've got to tell you this because he said, I've not been psychic before in my life, but I've just had a vision of a green stone. And I think we've got to find it. And I thought, and we just looked at each other. I mean, we'd told nobody about me talking about a green stone in this trance state, whatever you want to call it. And at the same time, this guy had this vision of a green stone. So we thought, wow, we've got to go in search of this. And that's kind of how it started off. And I must say something, that before that time, I personally, although I was interested in the paranormal and I'd seen a few strange things, I'd never personally gone off into a trance or done anything psychic myself at all. And that's how it began.
Very, very strange beginnings just to start with. But it's almost like we're always looking for the case of a lifetime. And this is that case for you guys, isn't it? And how it unfolds is just step by step incredible. Now, one thing I would like to state is a lot of research was going on as well. They weren't just taking psychic messages and disappearing off into the woodwork. You did a heck of a lot of hands-on research as well, didn't you? And this is what you do as a person. Everything you tackle, the work you do on the regards to the research behind it, following the historical clues through, is phenomenal. And that's something I really wanted to reiterate, is the research you do.
Yeah, well, for example, during this trance, stupefied state I was in, I actually mentioned that the members of the gunpowder plotters, who were ardent Catholics, were part of a secret society around the year 1600 called the Order of Mythology. And also in this group were people like Sir Walter Raleigh, who was a Protestant. Now, at the time, everyone said there is no way that such a group could exist, because someone like Raleigh, a Protestant, Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous explorer and statesman, could never have been involved with somebody like Robert Catesby, an ardent Catholic who led the gunpowder plot. They were on completely different sides of the religious divide. But over recent years, the research we've done, and in fact, what began this is a few years ago at a place called Cannons Ashby House, which is in the Midlands of England. A room was discovered that had all these plaques on the wall, all these heraldic crests of the people who used to meet in this secret room, like early Freemasons. And it turned out that the people who met here, nobody knew who they were, but the shields on the wall, we discovered, were all the names of the people that we discovered at that time through psychic messages were supposed to be involved in this Order of Mythology. I won't go into the whole details, but these shields included both Sir Walter Raleigh and Robert Catesby, proving that something that wasn't even known about at the time was somehow known to me in this trance-like state. So the research we did later helped prove that this crazy story I seem to have come up with really did fit into an historical context of a secret society that may well have possessed this green stone.
I find that fascinating, that psychic messages and the journey that started you on was so relevant, and that's the breadcrumbs started from psychic work. How rarely, it happens so rarely, doesn't it?
Well, as far as I know, I don't know of any case like this. I've only mentioned that one other person so far came up with information about it, this guy Alan Beard and his vision of a green stone. But he was just one of a number of people who contacted us that were either known to the Strange Phenomena team or had a dream or something where they thought they've got to contact this Strange Phenomena magazine, and we'd never known them before at all. Yeah. None of them knowing that we were looking for a green stone or anything to do with this secret society or anything. For example, a lady from North Wales by the name of Marion Sunderland, she had this dream, and she'd not had anything psychic happen to her before, that we should be looking in this place called Harvington Hall, which is where the clues that I'd said were left to reveal where the stone was. She had no idea that we'd never even heard of Harvington Hall before. We hadn't told anybody apart from Alan Beard, who'd contacted us. The next day, this lady Marion gets in touch with us, tells us we should go to this place, Harvington Hall. I mean, how does that work? I've never known a case where psychics, if you like, who not being previously psychic, suddenly get messages all about the same thing that actually comes together and actually leads to something which is, we discover later, genuine historical information that actually at the time nobody knew about.
I totally agree. Now, there is one question I had. At that point, did you not think to involve, or I don't know if you did or not, whether or not you involved like places like the Ghost Club or the SPR or ASAP or anything like that, or was you just winging it and seeing where it led?
Well, ASAP didn't exist at that point. That was founded later by people who were involved with us at that time.
Oh, I see.
The Society for Psychical Research considered us a bunch of idiots, so they weren't going to get involved. Mm-hmm. But we did have a number of people involved as consultants for the magazine. For example, there was we had Doris Stokes, who was like the top medium in the country at the time, the spiritualist medium. Mm-hmm. We had a guy called Andrew Green, who was the top ghost hunter. We had, I can't remember his name now, the guy who did all the research into Borley Rectory after Harry Price. Anyway,
Peter Underwood?
Peter Underwood, that's him. Lovely guy, Peter Underwood. Sorry, I forgot your name, Peter. And we told these people about it, but basically they thought it was a bit nuts. It really was outside. It wasn't really a ghost case. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really a case of paranormal phenomena that you could shove in a laboratory. It wasn't spiritualism in the way that somebody like Doris Stokes understood it. So nobody wanted to get involved because it was really just outside their remit. So we were on our own.
That must have been quite daunting at the time. Or was you at that age where it just rolled? You know, you just took the bull by the horns and just rolled with it? Because some of the actions you did when you went down the avenue of trees and you dug up the box and you had that impending doom feeling that you was being watched and that you needed to remove it straight away. At that point, that must have been... I can't even imagine what emotions you were going through your head at that time.
Well, being young, I was pretty excited about the whole thing. I mean, when we first got to Harvington Hall, at this point, I was still sceptical that we were kind of being wound up. I thought, okay, I've come up with all this stuff. Okay, out of my face on vodka, I come up with this stuff. Somehow these other people had found out about it and were winding me up. I trusted Andy implicitly, but had they bugged the place? I mean, I don't know. I still didn't really believe at this point that this was real. Mm. But when we got to Harvington Hall, we found out that not long before, they had discovered, hidden behind panelling in an upstairs corridor, a large wall mural called the Nine Worthies, because it depicted nine heroic characters from history and legend. It had been painted on the wall in around the year 1605, exactly the time that this stone was supposed to have been hidden, by a man called Humphrey Packington, who lived in the hall at that time, who was, it was later discovered, involved with the gunpowder plot. And when this mural was found, people said, it seems to be like a series of cryptic clues, but we don't understand what it means. Andy and I just looked at each other and said, wow, this is the clues that my whispering voice had spoken about. And I thought, this is just too much of a coincidence that this has only just recently been rediscovered, and it does seem like there are clues hidden in this building after all. But it wasn't until we actually found something at the end of this trail of clues that I really did believe it, because the central figure of this painting was a youthful King Arthur wielding Excalibur, and behind him was a hill with his knights gathered on it. I won't get into the whole details, it's going to take forever, but the bottom line was we worked out that it related, or it might relate, to a feature in the landscape not far from Harvington Hall called Knight's Hill, his knights gathered on a hill, and just below it, and in fact we don't even put this in the Greenstone book because this wasn't discovered until years later, there was an old bridge that divided two lakes that narrowed in the middle, an old footbridge that dated from the period of these paintings, from around the year 1600, and the bridge was actually called Arthur's Bridge, and we've seen this on old maps. And this clearly was what these clues appeared to be leading to. And eventually it was night time because Andy and myself were so excited. We weren't going to wait until daylight. We weren't even going to find out who owned this land before we started searching this bridge where we were sure that something was hidden. But just before we'd set off to go there, we'd got phone calls from two people, Alan Beard, who was one of the first people to see the Greenstone in his vision, and Marion Sunderland, who had told us about Harvington Hall. They both had a dream that we were actually at this point looking for a sword that would eventually lead us to the stone. Me and Andy worked out that because the King Arthur figure, there's a lot of other clues that went into it, but one of the main ones was, because the King Arthur figure in the murals was looking down and to his left, we should, with the hill behind him, if we stood in a similar position on the bridge and looked down and to the left, there was a whole lot of stones, which were basically the supports of the bridge at the side. And because the number in the paintings was because it was called the Nine Worthies, we eventually settled on 9 stones along and 9 stones down from the bridge. And when we got down to that level, it was completely overgrown. I mean, you know, nobody had been fiddling around there recently. We had to pull back brambles and everything.
And this is in the dark. I would like to say this is in the dark.
This is in the dark. All we have is flashlight. Because
in the 1970s.
Yes, there was no such thing as phones then to record any of this stuff. This is 1979, so we couldn't film it all. So we went there. Eventually, we managed to remove this stone, and behind it, there was a small alcove, and lying on it was clearly what was a short sword or a long dagger that was heavily encrusted with years of silt and sediment. And at that moment, I just thought, oh, my God, it's real. Not only have we just solved a 400-year-old mystery, and a 400-year-old historical mystery, we've been led here with the help of psychic visions and messages, some of which had come from me. So I'm thinking, wow, this is, I mean, I don't know what I thought. I was just staring at it. Andy was just sort of like completely shocked too. And when we took this out, we found that it was, in fact, we had it taken to a museum in the city of Chester, where it was analysed. It was cleaned up. It was analysed, and basically what it was a short Scottish ceremonial sword called a dirk, about 20 inches long with a 2-inch crossguard, and upon its hilt there was inscribed the personal monogram of Mary, Queen of Scots, the very person who was said to have possessed this stone. We'd found a sword, which 2 people had told us that would lead us somehow to the stone. But if there was any doubt whatsoever that this was connected to everything we were doing, along its blade we found inscribed in Elizabethan spelling the words Mianaya, remember the group had been called Mianaya, for Mary, as in Mary, Queen of Scots. That was written on the blade.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as I know, at that time, this was the first time that anyone had been involved in solving historical clues to find some hidden artifact. This was before the Indiana Jones film. It was years before the Da Vinci Code or anything like that. And it was the first time ever, as far as I know, that psychics had got together to find buried treasure. So, yeah, I was absolutely gobsmacked is the only word that I can use to describe.
Paul, do you want to step in at this point?
I just think it's an amazing story, and wow, just to find that is just a total dream of mine. Do you know what I mean? It's like I've always been interested in archaeology and folklore and stuff like that. So to be given sort of those spiritual messages to lead you to find something like that, wow, just wow.
Like I say, every time I talk about it or I've read about it, I just sit there and I think it just is mind blowing, because this is just like the beginning. We go
absolutely,
on.
and I mean, it doesn't also just, you know, to a degree, you know, you can using this psychic questing to find artifacts like this is amazing, but it could also be used in other areas, like, for example, helping police find murderers and things like that. It just opens up a whole new level of, do you know what I mean? It's
of connection between the spirit world and the physical. It really makes you question that, because it's laid out in history. You're following clues, and it's being backed up in physical things, and that's the amazing part about this story, I think. So God knows what it was like to live it. Can I ask, where is the Dirk now?
Now this is a really, again, how these strange things that were happening at the time, these bizarre synchronicities or coincidences, kept happening and echoing throughout time afterwards. Because the sword, we discovered after we'd basically taken the stone out of this bridge and taken the sword, we discovered that the sword was on the land of the Earl of Coventry. It's actually nowhere near Coventry, but the Earl of Coventry lived nearby. But we discovered that the Earl of Coventry had sold up his family home called Croom Court, it's not far from the city of Worcester. And at Croom Court, we went there to expect to see the Earl of Coventry, to say, look, we found this on your land. Can you tell us more about it? Presumably it's obviously yours. It's going to be in your possession because it's found on your land. And we discovered that the place was now owned by the Hare Krishna movement. They actually had it as their British headquarters at the time. You don't see much of the Hare Krishna people anymore, but at the time it was quite popular. They'd dance around the streets banging drums, bald-headed like sort of Buddhist monks, singing Hare Krishna. But as I say, you don't really get them anymore. Well, obviously you do, but you don't see them very often. But this was their headquarters. And we went to see like the top guy, and he was fascinated by the whole thing. But he said, no, we have no interest in such things. You can keep the sword. So we kept it. But it was a couple of years later when Andrew Collins wrote an article about this, that we never put this in the magazine, by the way. People said, you've just all made this up, to sell the magazine. Well, no, we never included it as an article in the magazine because it was just too far-fetched. And it hadn't come to a conclusion. So we didn't know what to write about it. So we didn't ever use it in the magazine. It was a couple of years later when Andrew Collins wrote an article somewhere about it, that the Earl of Coventry discovered this, and his estate manager got in touch with us and said, the Hare Krishna people may own Croom Court, but where the pool is, where this bridge is still our land. It's still the Earl of Coventry's land. And you remove this from his land without permission. We want it back now, or we're going to the police and we're going to sue you, and so on and so forth. So we returned it to the Earl of Coventry's estate. And it was ages later that we discovered that the Earl of Coventry eventually donated it to the Tudor House Museum in the town of Upton upon Severn, just south of Worcester. And it's still now on public display there. It's there's a whole display area with everything about the Greenstone story, the book. They've got copies of the book there behind glass cabinets and everything, and it's there for all the world to see, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
But what really is now? Here's the weird coincidence, and this is purely coincidence. It had nothing to do with us. The Earl of Coventry gave it to that museum because it was the nearest museum to where the sword was found. It was the nearest museum to where he lived. But it turns out that very building, which is now the Tudor House Museum, an old Tudor building in Upton-upon Severn, right across the road is an old church. And that church, in the year 1553, the vicar of that church, the priest, was Dr. John Dee, the famous Elizabethan occultist and astrologer, who just so happened to be the man we later discovered founded the Order of Meoniah. And that building of the Tudor House, where the Tudor House Museum is now, was the rectory. It was Dr. John Dee's home just before he gave up the priesthood and became an occultist. And the sword accidentally ended up in the house of the person who founded the order that possessed that sword and hid it. That's weird.
That is incredible. You can't make it up. You literally couldn't make it up, could you?
Because this is all the stuff that happens later. Now, the sword, people would say, well, okay, the sword, it's not the stone, is it? How it led to the stone really is a long story. But there is, it became, one of the things that happened is that a girl we knew, that one of the ladies involved, her daughter, suddenly started getting these, I can only call it psychic impressions again, that she first said if she held the sword and took it to the bridge, she'd be able to use it like a divining rod to point to where the sword, the stone was hidden. And that was kind of how we found it. But later we discovered that the whole thing revolved around the Order of Meoniah was founded originally in 1572, and it was inspired, why John Dee founded it, is because a new star had suddenly appeared in the skies. It's known as Tycho's star. It was actually a supernova, we know now, an exploding star that suddenly wasn't visible before but became bright for a few months. To them at the time, a new star had appeared, and it appeared in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. Now, to them, that meant a new age of enlightenment was at hand, and that's why the order was founded. But then in 1600, another star had appeared. This time, it actually was the brightening of an existing star that hadn't been previously visible with the naked eye. And this was recorded by the astronomer Johann Kepler at the time as appearing in the swan's neck, the neck of the swan in the constellation. And it was to a place called the Swan's Neck, very close to the bridge, where this girl with a sword led us. And when we got to this place, the Swan's Neck, which is actually a meander or bend in the River Avon, Marion Sunderland, the lady who had told us about Harvington Hall, had had a dream that she said she saw an avenue of trees that you mentioned just a while ago.
Yeah.
And she said at the end of it, we would find a mound, and that's where the stone would eventually be hidden. When we got to the Swan's Neck, right beside the river, was this avenue of trees, exactly as described by Marion. And it was from this mound that about 3 feet down, we uncovered this brass casket that was dated by the same museum that had looked at the sword to being from the 16th century, from the period in question. And inside was this small green stone. There's a lot more to the story than that, but obviously we haven't got the time to go into it.
And we want them to read the book.
Is,
we want you to go and read the book, guys. This is all the
details
of this is in the book,
read the
right?
Green Stone.
Absolutely.
The 40th anniversary edition, which is now out. It's been out of print for 40 years. But, so there's this small green stone, which was kind of like flat on one side and shaped as if it had once been set in a ring, which is, I think, how Alan Beard had his first vision of it, in a silver ring. There are paintings of Mary Queen of Scots wearing a silver ring with a green stone in it, so it probably was this same stone. And it was about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch long, half an inch wide, like half egg-shaped, I suppose you'd call it. And it was analysed, it was just made of simple jade. It was like various colours, variegated, I think they call it, dark and light, different colours of green, but it was jade. And at first, well, nothing happened. But when we took it back to the headquarters in Wolverhampton of the magazine, all hell began to break loose.
Mm-hmm. You had some extreme paranormal activity happening in the offices of where you of your magazine place, wasn't it?
That's right.
Right in the hub of it all. So this is your working place. This is going on in a workplace. Up to now through the story, there had been a slightly sinister overtone to this all. You thought that there was an opposition. You felt like you was being followed at various times. You felt like you was being watched. But it took a definite serious turn at this point, didn't it?
Yeah, it seemed. I mean, this is a part of it that I've never really got to the bottom of, who these people were. But somebody, I think it was Marion, kept having these dreams saying somebody else is also getting the same messages about this stone. And they want to find it too, but it shouldn't fall into their hands. I really can't remember the full details on all this. I mean, I haven't read the book myself for 40 years. And my memory isn't all that it used to be. But if I remember rightly, when we were looking for this stone, we kept seeing this same car following us. There was this white car. And we'd be sort of like involved in part of the search. And somebody'd say, oh, my God, look over there. And we'd look and just, parked with a couple of people in it you couldn't quite make out, seemingly just looking at us. A few hundred yards away, there was this white car. As we started to go towards it, it would drive away. We'd then end up somewhere else, and it would be there. So we thought there was somebody definitely following us. But the really sinister thing that happened that you mentioned, just to kind of start all this off, is one day we went to the pub round the corner. There was about 10 of us that worked at the magazine, but 3 of us were working one night. Martin Keatman, who I wrote The Green Stone with eventually, Andrew Collins and myself. And we went round to a pub round the corner for a drink. And when we got back to the headquarters in Wolverhampton, it's on this, it's just like this secluded close that it's in. And it's a very big old Victorian house. We got back to discover the door wide open. Somebody had clearly broken in. We went in the place, and there was all this blue gunge all over the walls, like some kind of, weird blue gelatinous substance. And we went through the house thinking someone's broken in, and well, this could be anybody. We were a magazine. People knew about us. Some people who didn't like what we did could have thrown gunge around, broke in. It could have been people who were just playing pranks on us. But while we were in there racing around the building trying to find out if anything had been stolen, which it hadn't, or anything had been broken, which it hadn't, suddenly the whole place began to fill with this strange incense-smelling smoke. And we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It was behind closed doors. It was in closets, cupboards. It was everywhere. And it was for about 10 minutes it stayed, and then it just dissipated. Now, there was no way that anyone could have set off a smoke bomb or anything else, because we'd have known where that was coming from. Mm-hmm. But it seemed to be coming from everywhere at the same time. So there was more of a dimension to all this than just somebody breaking in. And that was really the first thing that happened. We started, we'd got the police involved. They came around to check, about the break-in. They said there was nothing they could really do because nothing had been taken. And but they also said that the door had just been opened with a key, as far as they were concerned. Nobody had seemed to have forced the lock. We didn't know how that could have happened. They took away some of this blue gunge to have it analysed, and they basically said, well, with the facilities we have here, we can't tell what it is. We'd have to send it off to be analysed at a big forensic laboratory, which it's not worth us doing in this case, to find out what it is. But all we can say is we don't know what it is at the moment. And that's how it remained. But it got more sinister when one night we were, again, I don't know who was there, but I was certainly there, and Andrew was there, and a few others. And we're in the front room of the building downstairs, near where the door was to the offices. And suddenly there was this loud banging noise that seemed to come from all over the house, from different places. And then there was this bang on the front door, and I think the doorbell started buzzing. And we opened the front door, and in the wooden step, just below the door frame, there was this great big long kind of ritual-looking knife stuck in it. So clearly there was some physical people involved in all this, as well as some weird thing. And Marion, I remember, told us at the time that not were only people trying to get the stone, which actually wasn't there, but it was up at her house at the time. Not only were they trying to get the stone, but they were physically breaking in and trying to scare us. They were putting us, she said, under some kind of psychic attack.
Mm. And it certainly was an incredible psychic attack, wasn't it? I mean, you had spontaneous fires going on. You had poltergeist activity happening. I mean, God, you had all sorts of things happening. The building itself, you say in your book, started to almost like become dilapidated inside. Plaster was falling off the walls. You had really strange things going on.
Yeah, I mean, things began to move around. I mean, this smoke that appeared started appearing virtually every day after that, just as it began to get dark. And obviously, we a lot of people got to know about this. The press got to know about it. Hearing of these strange happenings in the house, we even the TV company Midland Today, the ATV one, whatever that was called, I can't remember. But the person they sent to interview us with the camera crew was Anne Diamond, who later went on to become really famous. Mm. And she actually came to the house and witnessed the smoke along with her film crew. None of them could make out what it was. I remember meeting her many years later and said, "Do you remember me? You came to our house in Wolverhampton." She said, "Oh, yeah, you're the editor of that magazine." Oh, creepy. I said, "Do you remember it?" She says, "Well, it's not every day I see something weird like that." So that was something, the only time she'd ever witnessed anything that weird. I'm not sure that they thought they were being had on by us or something, but the fact was that nobody could explain this strange smoke that appeared. We thought, some people suggested it could be something to do with the wiring gone wrong. So the electricity company came around, checked the whole place out. They could find nothing to account for it. But at the same time, there was all these weird electrical anomalies. Lights blew far more frequently than you'd expect. People got electric shocks off various equipment. And this kind of stuff carried on until one day when Andrew, Martin and myself were staying over at the headquarters, working late, again on the magazine. Andrew Collins was in his sleeping bag in the front room. And he woke up in the middle of the night, and you mentioned about this mysterious fire. He found flames leaping from his sleeping bag. Luckily, he got out of it, and he was unharmed. But I remember the press came round and got a photograph of him holding up this burning sleeping bag, which you can actually see if you go onto my webpage, which is grahamphillips.net, and look at the green stone. You can actually see the front cover of this newspaper article with Andy Collins holding up his burnt sleeping bag. Well, after all this happened, on top of it all, the electric company basically cut our electricity off because they said there's something dangerous here. We can't explain it, but until you get it fixed, the electricity's cut off. And we said, well, how do we get it fixed if you can't explain what it is? So with that, with all these accidents, all this weirdness, and then with the electricity cut off, the magazine basically sort of pretty much had to move out of there altogether and kept going from somewhere else. But we'd still got a year remaining on the lease, so we kept going back and visiting the place. And things inside the place just got stranger and stranger.
You was even seeing apparitions, weren't you? Now, the green stone ties into this. It was suggested that the power of the stone had opened up a portal, kind of environment, cross-dimensional situation, and needed to be discharged somehow.
Yeah, I think again it was Marion who said to us that nobody actually thought that the Greenstone had anything to do with what was going on necessarily. We thought maybe we were under psychic attack to start off with, because somebody wanted the Greenstone. But then when nothing else happened, there was no more incidences of break-ins and anything else, just this weird phenomena. We kind of thought that what was causing it is because we'd had so many people there who were psychics and mediums, and we'd done various experiments in the paranormal and done seances and you name it, that we'd attracted something. So where some people in the team, in the Strange Phenomena team, basically resigned or were frightened to return to that building, most of us were kind of pretty excited to have what seemed to be a poltergeist case, so close to home. So we kept going back there, and things just got weirder and weirder. As I say, you can read about all those in the book. But Marion, I think, was the first to suggest, she says, I don't think it's just because you've had mediums around that all this weird stuff has happened. I think it's because the stone itself has opened some kind of portal, some kind of preternatural rift. And I said, well, the stone's now at your house. I mean, nothing's happening there. She said, no, I think the stone opened this up in the when the moment you brought it back, and it could do so again somewhere else, but at the moment that's where the rift's been open, and unless we discharge the power of the stone, this phenomena that's happening inside the Oaks Crescent, that's what the name of the road it was in, the Oaks Crescent headquarters, unless if the stone is discharged, it's just going to get worse and worse and spread. And some of the things that were happening inside the house were just weird. You mentioned that that the place began to sort of collapse from within. It did. In a period of a few weeks, not over years, the place seemed to fall apart from inside. The plaster fell from the walls, ceilings collapsed, pipes rusted and burst, that sort of thing. And it was almost as if time inside the building was passing at an accelerated rate. And Marion said if we didn't discharge the stone somehow, this would spread. So we thought, okay, we'll do what she says anyway. She suggested we took it to some form of hallowed ground, and eventually we chose a place nearby, near Wolverhampton, called White Ladies Priory, an old monastic building. It's basically an old priory from the Middle Ages that's just a ruin. And I think some of the team, for some reason, thought that the stone might have been fashioned there. But anyway, that's where we went. And Marion thought that we ought to put the stone on this old burial mound that lay in a woodland just outside where the ruin was, and told us that she thought something horrible was going to happen, or something quite spectacular would happen at 9:30 at night that evening when it was dark. And we went back inside the ruined walls of the priory. There was actually 9 of us there at the time. And when 9:30 arrived, there was this kind of really weird screeching sound came from the woodland area where the stone had been left, about 50 yards away. And I don't know what it was. It was like a really weird screeching sound that seemed to rise into the air. And then following that, these 5 kind of balls of light, kind of flashing on and off, rose into the air slowly. They weren't like fireworks or anything. And they weren't like flares. They went up slowly out of the wood. And then they all joined together into one big ball of light that moved towards us. And then just before it got to us, the thing exploded with like an ear-shattering bang, and this light that lit up the whole area around us. And then it was like just silence. And at that point, we just ran for it and just got away from there as quickly as possible. I can't remember what I think we came back for the stone the next day or something, and it was just lying there, if I remember rightly. But after that, the phenomena stopped. And as far as I know, nothing ever weird happened at that Victorian building again. It remained dilapidated and completely unused for a few years until it was eventually sold off and turned into apartments. And I still need to go back one day and interview people there to tell me if anything since has happened.
Well, that is one question that we've had. We've got so many questions to ask you in the chat room, so I'm going to move on to those questions because I want you to go and read the book, everybody, to find out what happened next, really. So I want to get these questions covered. So going on literally what you've just said, John Fraser, thank you for joining us, has said, why do you think nothing similar has happened to anyone else since, or has it?
Well, I have absolutely no idea to that one. I mean, the thing is that since then I've written all sorts of books about all sorts of different historical mysteries without there being anything psychic involved in it. But I have had many strange coincidences or synchronicities happen. And since those weird things happened to us, I have always been on the lookout for weird synchronicities. And people will say to me, how come you find things like the Holy Grail, or you know where the Ark of the Covenant is and you write books about it when no one else has? Well, because I've opened my mind up to the possibility of strange coincidences can guide you in the right direction when you run out of historical clues, these things seem to happen. And to say that they have happened to nobody else is probably wrong, because, for example, think about the way that the Buddhist lamas find a new Dalai Lama when the old one dies. They follow a series of signs and they find a child, and that child becomes the new Lama. Shamans all over the world kind of use these techniques, if you like, divination by landscape, to find artifacts and answers to things. So I don't think it hasn't not happened to anybody else. But I can't explain why it happened to us when it did, other than the fact that perhaps we were the first people to bring together such a group of psychic people from all sorts of different walks of life. Some of them from a background of UFOs and would call themselves abductees, others mediums, psychics, and perhaps that's why it happened to us at the time.
Now, Paul, I know you have a little theory on this one.
I was about to say that, yeah. Have you ever considered that maybe it's something to do with past lives? For example, I don't know, maybe you was connected to it in some way in a previous life, and something now has sort of, well, back in the 70s, triggered off a past life memory that led you to the sword and dagger.
Kind of. When I say that I haven't been doing this weird stuff, I have. This weird stuff, like with the Greenstone, has been happening, but I've not been writing about it ever since. Mm. And it's been happening so much over the last year or so, last few years, that I'm writing a book about all that now, which comes out next year. That'll explain everything, basically. One of the things I discovered, I mean, in the Greenstone book, we mentioned that the Order of Meani didn't finish in around 1605, that it was still going, or a group that had refounded themselves with that name were going at the end of the 19th century in Victorian times. And it was led by a woman called Mary Heath from Biddulph Grange in North Staffordshire. Now, Mary Heath, we discovered, had all sorts of, claimed to have had all sorts of weird psychic powers, if you like. And she also had found a stone that she did all sorts of weird things with. I won't go into all that. That's another story. Mm-hmm. But she was a major player in all this. And it's only literally last week, in the last couple of weeks, that I've been going down to see a house in Gloucestershire where the Heath family's final possessions ended up. And it's now, people are clearing it out. And I've been down there. And along with that and a genealogist who's been helping me, I have found out that I am the great-grandson of Mary Heath. And I have no idea. My father was adopted. Nobody knew who his father was. And it's only just been discovered. So it may not be reincarnation. It may be something in the blood.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another possibility.
Very fascinating. Yeah, fascinating. And again, coincidental or synchronicity links going on.
Yeah, it's I mean, as I said, there's so many things that have happened since to confirm what were just psychic impressions back when the Greenstone book was written. This 40th anniversary version of it has got a new introduction by me, and it's got a load of new pictures that were never there before. But the story is as it was originally, because most people have never read it. But on the 26th of October, we're actually having a special event in Wolverhampton, at the Britannia Hotel that Andrew Collins has organised, that I'm giving a talk there. And in my talk, this Greenstone event, I'm going to be telling people about some of the things that have happened, that are happening today, that are proving the historicity, if you like, of the story that happened back then. And I'll be talking about some of the weird things that are still happening to me now. So if anybody wants to come to that event, it's on the 26th of October. You can go to andrewcollins.com website and you can see all about that event. People might be interested in that. A lot of the people that were involved in the story at the time, the ones that are still alive, because many of them have since passed, because they were quite old at the time, will be giving a talk there. So people might be interested in that too.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for being in the chat room. You have been very patiently waiting for your questions to be answered. Firstly, what are your thoughts about the Greenstone auction situation?
Well, I had nothing to do with that. The Greenstone itself and the casket, I mean, I didn't keep any of these things. As I said, the sword was given to the Earl of Coventry, now on public display. The casket and stone ended up with somebody else. As far as I was concerned, that was fair enough. Didn't really bother me. And it was auctioned off. It had nothing to do with me at all. The way I look at it, then I say, what was behind all this discovery of this stone in the first place, whatever put all this information into my head that started it off and into other people's minds, if it doesn't want that stone in somebody's hands, it won't get into their hands. Mm-hmm. If it does want it in somebody's hands, this is just the way I looked at it, then so be it. So I just thought, when this auction's taking place, that somebody wanted to auction it off, then fair be. If it's not meant to happen, it won't happen. That stone knows what it's doing. So I personally don't think it's got any power anymore. It never did anything, after this. Well, things did happen that we thought were associated with this stone, but I think the stone's power went when this ball of light exploded. So it's basically it's a relic, but it might have power. I don't know, but whoever's got it, I don't know who's got it. I don't know where it is, but my feelings on it is, so let it be.
Mm. No, I'm with you. I think you're right. I think it will be where it needs to be or wants to be.
Well, the sword ended up in John Dee's house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right there, definitely. Mark has also asked another couple of questions. He said, is Boyd Lee's account of the search for the Eye of Fire accurate?
I don't know. I've not read it, but she was there, so I would say yes.
Okay, and has the Eye of Fire reappeared yet?
Terry smashed it up with a hammer. Okay, basically what happened was that altogether 9 stones were found. They weren't mentioned in any books. The Greenstone is all about one of the stones. The Eye of Fire is all about another one. There were another 7 found at that time. And all sorts of weird things started happening in Terry Shotton's house. Now, he was one of the people involved. He was another of the researchers involved with the magazine. His speciality was UFOs, but he ended up with all the stones being in his house. This was after the Wolverhampton headquarters had been abandoned and everything, and all sorts of weird things started happening in his house, of which I'm going to be talking about a little bit in my new book about how it's relevant to what's going on now. Mm-hmm. And Terry decided at one point that the Eye of Fire might be responsible and smashed up the stone with a hammer. So if anybody claims to have got it, they haven't.
Ah, there you go. Well, we could talk to you all night, Graham, so thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about the 40th anniversary of the Greenstone. I'm reading this book. It is absolutely fascinating and awe-inspiring, the experiences you went through. I don't know how I would have coped under the same circumstances, in all honesty.
Vodka.
Vodka. It sounds like a good place to start, doesn't it? Will you please come back and discuss some of your other quests and researches that you've done on another show for us?
Absolutely delighted to.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. I've shared all of the links to all of the websites we've discussed, and obviously the link to the book into the chat room, which you can still access once we've gone to podcast, guys. So if you're looking for the link and you've not seen it out on the socials, then you can find it in our chat room as well as our Facebook group page. Well, Paul, what a show.
I know, totally blow you away, doesn't it? Heads exploded all over the curtains now.
I know. And we kind of, it's like, Graham, I have to say, there are many times comic value comes into it, because you can imagine going back into the 70s, the how it kind of unfolded with the technology and the cars you had back then and the fashion and all that. So please tell me, somebody's going to do a film of this at some point, or a mini-series or something, surely?
Well, people have tried over the years, but it's never got anywhere. I don't think the time's right. But now they're making things about there's like the Enfield hauntings being made into, and the Conjuring and Annabelle and all those things. They're all set at that same kind of period of time. So I don't know. There seems to be a fad for this sort of thing. So as we were there at the same time as the Amityville horror was going on, maybe somebody will do this. And certainly it's worth making into a film, because I actually got somebody once to count the amount of times that flea was used in the book. 106.
I could actually imagine it being a really good horror movie. Because you could have like the whole psychic quest in, you're finding the stone, and then it all sort of kicks off and you get the demons come through. Stuff like that, you know. Typical horror movie stuff.
I'm sure it's bound to be one day, but maybe I'll be long dead and gone by then.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's hope you can sit there with your popcorn and watch your part of your life story unfold on the big screen, or even the big screen indoors. Guys,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us in the chat room. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we also appreciate that. How much can we cram into an hour? I think we did quite well on that one. But Graham is going to come back. You heard it here first. He's going to come back and talk about some of his further research, books and escapades that he's been on since that has happened. On that note, we thank... Oh, sorry, I'm shutting your show down, Paul. Sorry.
You're right. So keep going. You know, gives me a week off. Go for it. Carry on. You're doing a wonderful job.
Don't forget, if you miss any of our shows, pop over to our YouTube channel, Parasearch Radio, and whilst you're over there, click like, share and subscribe. And don't forget to keep up to date with all the goings on with Parasearch Radio. Go over to our Facebook group page and like page. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you once again. Thank you so much, Graham, for joining me. Us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Freudian slip there. Paul?
And I totally second everything Kerry just said, because otherwise it'd just hit me later. So it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.